Hi, Greg. Thank you for coming back to see me again. It was nice getting to know you a little bit last week, and I'm glad you came in today. I just wanted to tell you real quick what we're going to be doing in our time together. We will do a mood check and find out how your week has been, and we'll review the homework that you did. We'll prioritize the agenda, just figure out what it is that you'd like to talk about and work on. We'll work on an issue and learn a little bit more about cognitive behavioral therapy and skills that go along with that. We'll probably set some new homework towards the end that will help you as you practice cognitive behavioral therapy skills. And we'll go over a summary of the time we've spent together, and then I'll ask for some feedback. Does that sound okay to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions about that?
Not so far.
Okay. So if you remember last week, I asked a mood check, and I'm going to do that again today. And what a mood check is again, where we look at your anxiety, which is what we talked about last week, and we rate it for this last week. So on a scale of 1 being no anxiety at all, and 10 being the most anxious you've ever been, where would you rate your anxiety over the past week?
Well, I think it would probably have to be around an 8.
Okay, so that's a lot of anxiety. How are you feeling that in your body?
Well, I get really tight chest feelings. Sometimes my heart gets going, and sometimes it'll be during times when I don't really, maybe not even at work, and I'm relaxing, and it will just come upon me and just feels like it kind of seizes me.
Okay, so you're having anxiety sometimes when there's situations, and then you're also having anxiety when you're relaxing and it's not maybe a moment that seems like it would be an anxious moment.
Yeah, it happens anytime.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that it's been so high, and hopefully the things we work on today will help. Can you tell me on a scale, again, the same scale, 1 to 10, how anxious you're feeling right now in the session?
Probably about a 5.
Okay, so a little bit more calm right now as we're together. Great. I'd like you to tell me in 2 or 3 sentences just how your week went this past week and how things have been going for you since we last saw each other.
Well, we've had a lot of projects at work, and it's just been, I'm a manager for those projects, and it's on my shoulders to get those things done, and it's just absolutely feels quite crushing, and it's overwhelming, and it's a lot of pressure from the people around. I feel like I'm not going to get this done, and I'm going to maybe tick some people off, or some people are going to get really upset. There's a lot of people counting on me at work to get these things done, and if I don't, I'm fall behind.
Okay, so a lot of pressure at work, a lot of stress and anxiety at work. Anything else going on in the last week that I should know about?
Well, then there's, with all that, I put in a lot of time, so there's not a whole lot going on at home. I'm not feeling that I'm spending near much time with my kids, and you could see that, you get home and tuck them in, and that's about it. And I just feel like I'm so overwhelmed. I'm not accomplishing anything at work and not accomplishing anything at home either.
I can see why your anxiety has been up when you feel that way. That's a difficult thing to feel, and most people want to feel like they're accomplishing things in all the different areas of their life, and it sounds like you have at least 2 areas, work and home, where you're feeling overwhelmed. Okay. Well, let's look at your homework that you did this last week and go over it. And I'll just remind you real quick, the cognitive behavioral therapy, just as a reminder, we're looking at how your thoughts impact how you feel, and then how you feel impacts what you do. And so I asked you this past week to write down a situation where you felt really upset, really anxious, and distressed. And I'm hoping that you did that, and we'll work through this homework and go over the situation. So were you able to do that?
Yeah, I was able to do that.
Okay. So can you tell me about the situation?
Well, yeah, it's work project, and it's not so much just one work project, but several of them that have come on, and so it's been a balancing act at work to have. Normally, I'd have big projects I'd be working on, but it's gone up to 4. So it's
Wow.
been quite overwhelming and feeling that I'm not getting anywhere on any of them.
Okay. So can you tell me the emotions that you were having around these projects?
Well, one of the big things is looking at that is, doubting yourself and going, can I do this?
Okay. So really that's a thought when we look at CBT. It's important to recognize the difference between emotions and thoughts. And so our emotions are usually how we feel, and we usually are aware of emotions first. And if you remember, we talked a little bit about automatic thoughts last week, and what automatic thoughts, just as a reminder, those are thoughts that just pop into your head. They go through your head without you even a lot of times noticing them. And so when you feel distressed or upset, often you've had an automatic thought that is behind that feeling you're having. And then when you feel distressed and upset, you act based on how you feel. So can you tell me the thoughts that were going through your head when you had the 4 projects and you were anxious?
Well, a lot of the thoughts were, am I smart enough to do this? I've seen other people, it seem like, that are able to handle these things easily. And here I am struggling so much with that. And it's just, I feel like even if I get them done, it's going to be late. And it's going to be really delayed, and which would be bad. And then it just makes me feel bad about, myself.
Mm-hmm. And when you feel anxious and you feel bad about yourself, how does that affect your behavior then?
Well, I think that probably shows through, my work and a little bit of my performance, and times when maybe I should be really at it, which I feel like I am, but at the same time I feel a little more timid and I doubt myself.
Okay. So, so you went through the homework and you identified a situation and how you felt and the thoughts that you were having. What was that like for you to recognize the thoughts that went along with your emotions? Those were some pretty heavy, kind of negative thoughts that you had. Had you realized before that you were having thoughts like that?
Not so much.
Okay. Was it helpful to see that?
Yeah, I think it is, to look at it and really kind of be able to put it down on paper and to realize what's going through. You kind of know it, but don't really point it out, necessarily normally. And you see that, then you can recognize those, even especially the next day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for doing the homework. It sounds like there was things about it that were helpful. And I may ask you to continue that and then add something to it for this next week. Looking at what you've mentioned so far, the issue of your work stress and also your home and not being able to do what you'd like to at home, of those 2 problems, which do you think is the most important or the one you'd like to spend time on today?
I would say work.
keep working on the situation you've mentioned from your homework. And one of the things I wanted to tell you about is something called cognitive distortions. We didn't get a chance to talk about that last week, so I have a list of them that I'll give you here, and let me explain what they are, and you can read them later after our session is over. Cognitive distortions are patterns of thinking that we all have. We all do all of the different distortions at some point in time, but most of us have a few, 3 or 4 that we use a lot. And they're thinking patterns that are usually not very helpful to us, and many times are skewed. They're not really factual or based on truth. And so one of the things that we do in cognitive behavioral therapy is we learn to identify the cognitive distortions that we happen to use. And part of the reason we do that is so that we can catch ourselves in those negative thinking patterns, and we can make a choice to think in a more balanced way about situations. I just want to point out, I heard a lot of negative things that you thought about yourself, and there is oftentimes with automatic thoughts, they tend to be negative. And one of the distorted thinking is called a negative filter. And what that means is that you may, in looking around and in certain circumstances, you may tend to see the negative and discount the positive things that are happening as well. And that may be something that's going on for you. And so what I'd like you to do this week is to take home that list and identify 3 or 4 cognitive distortions that you think that you might use when you are thinking about situations, and especially when you're distressed, when you're feeling a lot of anxiety and just distressed. Is that something you think you can do?
Yeah, I could do that.
Do you have any questions about cognitive distortions? Okay. Let's work a little bit on the issue that you've talked about from work and review the problem in general. When you look at the anxiety that you're having, do you have kind of a broad goal of what you would like to see in your life around these issues?
Well, a broad goal would just be able to, I think, efficiently work in a way that it doesn't negatively, impact me so much and affect my happiness of my home life. And I would like to be able to enjoy work too, but I want to be efficient and the best at what I do.
All right, so you want to be good at your job and be happier and have, it sounds like, less anxiety or stress at work. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
So those would be the broad goals that we're working towards. Okay, so I'd like you to think over the last week, and you can use the situation there, or if you have another situation, and tell me about a time where you were really anxious this last week.
Yeah, I was already working and, again, so busy and balancing everything, and then there's a situation that popped up right in the middle, basically right in the middle of a meeting, and it was, something that had to be taken care of right away from somebody else, and had to pull me away from somebody else that needed me and wanted me right away, and that environment was just so stressful, especially because it involved other people at work and made me very self-aware. It felt like I was just letting everybody down, and it was almost hard to function.
Sounds like you really feel it in your body when that is going on. Yeah, and that's really normal. I think a lot of times people feel anxiety even sometimes first in their body before they notice that it's even an emotional reaction. And one of the things that's good to know is to recognize those signs when you are feeling anxious and distressed in your body, so that it can be a cue for you in the future to think about what just went through your head. What were the thoughts that just went through your head, so that you can evaluate those thoughts. And we'll practice that a little bit here in a minute. So you were in one person in the meeting, they needed you, and then it got interrupted with another request for help, and it was impacting the people around you, and it sounds like you had some doubt. What went through your head at that time? What thoughts went through your head?
Well, I was upset. There a bit. I was a bit angry. I don't think I showed it, but I think I was angry that I was being pulled like that, but also a little bit embarrassed. And it felt like I could have probably handled the situation a little bit easier, because I wasn't sure what to do
Okay.
and how to handle it.
So your emotions that you had were being upset and angry and embarrassed.
Right.
What thoughts went through your head? You said you were afraid you weren't able to do
Right.
this.
I was afraid I wasn't able to do it, and thoughts that how am I going to do this, and that I can't, times of I can't.
Okay. So the thought that I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what did you do in that situation?
Well, I had to basically deal with that one person for a little bit, but as quick as possible, and then try to get back to the person that I left there, because I couldn't really leave them hanging. And unfortunately, I don't think it didn't turn out as good as I would have liked it, because people were left hanging a little bit. My time was stretched.
Okay. Can you tell me what you mean by people are left hanging?
Waiting.
So people are having to wait for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That usually bothers me.
Okay. All right. We might come back to that. So this thought that you can't do this in the middle. Have you had that thought before in other situations, other stressful situations?
Well, just in things or projects, or when a task has been assigned that it seemed like in the past that didn't go too well, or I felt that I wasn't good at, and the immediate feeling is like, this is not the thing for me. I'm not the best person for this. And that really affected me, and the anxiety, because it was something like, how am I going to do this, because I feel like I can't.
Yeah. So have you accomplished things at work in the past?
Oh yeah, I have, and sometimes in those situations they end up, turning out okay, and I think I've accomplished a lot of things at work, and so I feel that I'm good at my job. It's just, I think it's just overwhelming right now.
Okay. But you have been able to accomplish things in the past, and it sounds like maybe you said you feel like you're doing good at your job. Has someone told you in the past that you are good at your job?
Yeah, I've had some, have had some positive feedback in what I do.
Okay. Is there any evidence that supports that you're not able to do the work at your job?
I don't think so. I've usually been able to do everything, and do a fairly decent. At this point right now is the time to where I'm not sure if it is decent or not, but in the past, yeah.
Okay. So right now there's not really any evidence to support that you can't do the things that you're being asked. You're feeling anxious, but in general your evidence supports that you are capable and you're able to do the things that are asked of you.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone else, a friend, was in a similar situation at work, what would you tell them?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's the things that pop in my head just kind of sound silly because they're off the head about just being able to try to leave work behind or don't bring it home and find some relaxation time to be able to leave it and not to absorb it so much and identify it as you. Because it's a job and it's work, but it's not you. So I'd probably say something like that.
If they said to you, I just don't think I can do this, what would you say to them?
Well, I think I'd probably try to give them positive, stuff that I thought that they could do it, and that I thought that they were capable of what they did.
Okay. Sorry about that. I've given you too many papers to hold on to.
Pay attention.
Okay, so you would probably tell a friend in a similar situation that they are capable, that they can do this. In your own life and in this situation, is there a more helpful way of you thinking about the situation?
Well, sometimes I think I take things maybe a little bit too personally at work and take it upon myself as my as a ding against my character. And so I think that I could in the same way tell myself that it's not and that I do good work. And always know there's room for improvement, but I'm a very capable person, and remind myself of that.
Okay. That's very useful, and it goes back to, again, what we're talking about with cognitive behavioral therapy. How we think affects how we feel and what we do. And so the bad news is that you have learned ways of thinking that are not very satisfying to you. But the good news is they were learned. And so you are able to unlearn ways of thinking and look at how you're thinking, evaluate it, and make a choice about how you think about things in the future that might be more rewarding and help you to feel less anxious and feel better in general and happier, like you mentioned one of your goals being. So your original feeling of I can't do this at work, when that happened, when you were experiencing that, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I don't believe it at all, and 10 being I completely believe it, where would you rate yourself on that belief? How strongly you felt that belief or thought that?
That I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
At that time,
Mm-hmm.
probably about a 7.
Okay. And now, as you're sitting here and we're talking about it, on the same scale, 1 being you don't believe it at all, and 10 being you believe it the strongest, where would you rate yourself on that thought now?
Say 4 or 5.
Okay. So it sounds like you don't believe it quite as strongly
Yeah.
as then. Well, good. That's great. Are there advantages to believing the thought that you just can't do things?
No, I don't see a whole lot of advantages to it. It seems to be crippling.
Okay. So you would say that there are disadvantages
Right.
to believing that. Is that a belief that you would like to change? Okay, great. We will work on that, and we've begun to work on it as we've talked about evidence for and evidence against some of these beliefs that we have when we're distressed. Any other situation over the last week where you felt really anxious and upset?
Well, it probably had to do more with just because of work and also a little bit outside of it, just not having, the time to get everything done and stuff done at home also. And getting up and trying to get up extra early and get everything done and going in and walking in and just everything just kind of going poorly right off the bat. Where you wake up and it just every single little thing seemed to go not right.
So was that at home or at work?
Well, it seemed like both of them
Mm-hmm.
that hit, and it's it's one of those times you put your head down and just kind of like, is anything going to go right? And
So when that morning happened, what went through your head? What thoughts went through your head?
the thoughts were that I can't. I think I was blaming myself. I was feeling that I just couldn't keep it together. That I was just, the thought was, man, you're pathetic.
That's painful. That's a painful thought. Yeah. How did you feel at that time? What were the emotions you were having?
I was angry and sad at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And just really bummed out and then upset. I felt like I was just really messing up.
Yeah. And was your anxiety, how was that?
Not good.
Was it high?
Pretty high.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'd like to look at the situation and again focus on the thoughts. And you mentioned that when this happened, you thought, this is my fault. I can't keep things together. I'm pathetic. These kinds of thoughts, this I can't do things, or I'm pathetic, these are really tapping into something that we call core beliefs. So these are things that are deep down, and they're messages that we get over our lifetime about who we are and our value, and usually at the bottom of ourselves, down deep, is a core belief, and one of those is hopelessness. And it sounds like that might be something that you're dealing with. So the reason that that's important to know is that if we know about our core belief, then we can talk back to it. So if we know that hopelessness is an issue that you think and it's a core belief, we also know that a lot of automatic thoughts come from our core belief. So if we can talk back to automatic thoughts, that helps us. But if we can also talk back to that core belief, then that helps us decrease those negative automatic thoughts. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to ask you a few questions that kind of taps into that issue of your core belief. What would it mean to you if you couldn't do the things that were asked of you?
What does it mean to me? Well, I'd feel, I think, poorly for myself that I thought I was able to do these things that were asked. I would feel incapable.
Okay. What would be the worst part about feeling incapable?
I feel bad about myself, I think.
Would it mean something about you if you were not capable?
I think it depends what it is, but if it's not as things I think I should be, but I'm not, then I feel like there's something wrong with me.
So, these feelings that you're having about not being able to do things and doubting yourself, you mentioned early on in the session that there might be something wrong with you. These are tapping into that core belief of hopelessness. And what I would like to ask is there that you are a capable person?
I think I'm a capable person in what I do, and I think I've been pretty successful in the things that I've done.
Okay, so what types of things in life have you been successful?
Generally speaking, I have been successful at work and doing a good job there, and just being a team player and getting stuff done, and clients being happy with our work and the projects that we've built out for them, and but also I think I've done okay in general in life.
Okay, so are there other areas besides your work where you have been capable, have shown yourself to be capable?
Well, I've done a little bit of volunteering and in some areas, and it's been, I think it was useful and helpful.
Good. How about relationship-wise? Have you shown yourself to be capable in relationships?
I've had a good relationship.
Okay. So what I'd like us to do now is work on the beliefs, and I'm going to give you this piece of paper, and I'd like you to write at the top, old belief. And I think from what you said, I'm not capable was that old belief. That was the belief that you had agreed that you'd like to change. And right now, I'm going to ask you again on that scale of 1 to 10, how strongly would you say that you think that you're not capable? 1 being don't believe it at all, and 10 being the strongest?
Well, I think I'm probably a 3.
Okay, great. So write that down. And then we're going to put underneath that new belief. And I heard you say that you were, good at your work and capable of doing your work, and you did volunteer work that was useful, and you have good relationships. So somehow, in words that make sense to you, I don't want it to be my new belief, I want it to be your new belief. What might you put down as a new belief? It doesn't have to be anything complicated. Just, you mentioned that you were capable at work, and with volunteering and in relationships. Would that work for, do you believe that?
Yeah.
Okay. Could that be your new belief?
Yeah.
Okay, so write that down. And let's do the same thing on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being don't believe it at all, and 10 as strongly as you believe. How would you rate the strength of your belief, of the new belief?
Say it 2.
Okay. So, not really feeling it yet, but you are willing to look at a new belief. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things about cognitive behavioral therapy is that we practice evaluating our thoughts, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It took a lifetime to learn this way of thinking and these patterns. Luckily, it's not going to take that long to make a difference, but it doesn't happen overnight. So what I would like you to do, and this is part of looking at your homework for next week, we talked about you, again, writing down a situation where you felt really distressed, the thoughts that go through your head, and your emotions, and then to add in the cognitive distortion list, to look at 3 or 4 distortions that you say, okay, yeah, these are ones that I use sometimes. And then the last thing I'd like you to do is each day, I'd like you to look at this card and remind yourself of your old belief and rate how strongly you're feeling it that day. And then remind yourself of your new belief and rate how strongly you're feeling and believing that day. Is that something that you think that you can do?
Yeah.
Do you think that it might be helpful? Okay, great. We are getting towards the end of our session, and I want to just do a summary of our time together. We started out with a mood check, and we looked at your anxiety over the last week, and then we got an update about how you've done that week. We went over the agenda, what we would be covering. Then we worked together to prioritize that your work situation was the main thing that you wanted to talk about. We worked on that and evaluating thoughts that you had around that and looking at new thoughts. We learned a little bit more about cognitive behavioral therapy. And then we set some new homework. That was basically the time that we've had together so far. Is there anything else that you can think that I missed to add to that summary?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I'd like to ask for some feedback now. What do you think about today's session?
Well, I think it went really well. I think these are good things that when I really look at them and think about it in the whole picture, and especially the positives, that I think it helps me handle those rough situations.
Great. Anything that bothered you that I might have gotten wrong?
Not that I can think of.
Anything you'd like me to do different next time?
It's good.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you came in. Again, it was good to work with you around these issues, and I look forward to us meeting again next week. Does the same day and time next week work for you?
Yeah, this will work.
Okay. I will see you then. Thanks so much for coming in.
Great, thank you.